The Reclamation on Ryobius, 437 M41. During routine data scouring of mundane Imperial transmissions, Explorator Fleet Intermisius Mons analyzed geological surveys of a recently cataloged colony world. Considerable promethium deposits, lumber of exceptional strength, and seismic evidence showing uniform structures composed of an anomalous stone. Features familiar to the most venerable machine spirits occupying the cogitators of the flagship, Inexoralum Serratus. Logic engines shook dust from cathedral ceilings as they roared to life. Ancient search protocols triggered for a world twice lost to humanity. In their clumsy march through the galaxy, the clueless and inefficient drones of the Administratum unknowingly rediscovered a world recorded to have been settled in the decades before the Age of Strife. It was just as quickly lost in the ensuing chaos, but rediscovered during the Great Crusade some 5 millennia later. A Mechanicus pilgrim fleet from Forge World Triplex Fall found and laid claim to this world's resources and potential STC fragments. Ever the opportunists, the tech priests of that time, laid the foundations of a mining colony to act as quarry, dig site, and refueling station on the way to their new future Forge world. Their preparations were poorly timed, however, as tragedy soon struck the galaxy. They were recalled home during the heresy, when their origin system was crippled by traitorous incursion, their holy harvest on that planet abandoned. For reasons lost to time, the Ark Mechanicus ship that was to lead the pilgrim fleet to their new Forge world never returned from that mining planet with the rest of the ships. In the ensuing war and period of reconstruction, even the coordinates of that colony were lost. Ever since, the priests of Triplex have searched the stars for their lost ark and the secret coordinates of their planned Forge world settlement, stashed in its data stacks. The rediscovery of this planet, its resources, and the archaeotech left behind during humanity's 2 great calamities, presented an opportunity for the Explorator fleet, an opportunity to step out of the shadow of Triplex Fall and start casting a shadow of its own. With the very same ancient ships that once attempted to strip mine this world, they would now ransack it for any hint to the Ark's fate. Nothing short of a 3rd galactic catastrophe would be sufficient to dissuade the Adeptus Mechanicus from the treasures of this world. Current Imperial designation, Ryobius. As the Explorator fleet entered orbit, it began broadcasting standard trespass warnings on all open Imperial channels, as well as sending recommended citizen evacuation methods on the meagerly encrypted channels of the planetary governance. The message was made evident. This planet was claimed 10,000 years before by the Archmagos of Explorator Fleet Intermisius Mons. Recent colonists were to leave the planet in a timely manner so the Adeptus Mechanicus may continue excavation of its secrets and harvesting of its resources. Any who stayed would be charged without trial as squatters and subsequently rounded up and recruited in these righteous endeavors. An elegant solution, considering the new plans to repurpose the world as a penal mining colony secretly sponsored by the Inquisition. Any who refused to leave would simply be granted their wish once their homes were repurposed as holding cells. Initial Auspex readings indicated slight changes in the anomalous stone shapes littering the planet, and no evidence of the lost Ark. But a more pressing issue crowded the cogitators of the Archmagos Explorator, Methodius IV. A contingent of the Blood Angel's successor chapter, the Knights of Blood, had begun demolition of precious machinery, both new and archaic, at an ancient Promethium refinery site outside the colony city of Canterbury. As is often the way with Astartes chapters, efforts to hail them and correct their errors were in vain, the Marines claiming these machines were allegedly agitating other machines into violence. Improbable as the notion was, Methodius filed away plans to diagnose any potential deviations in machine spirit behavior and resanctify all recovered machinery. To protect this bounty of the Omnissiah, Methodius released a Scitari detachment led by Scitari Marshal Orlydian Beta I and supervised by Magos Dominus Lazifex. They approached the Knights of Blood from the cover provided by towering promethium pumps and refinery equipment. The Scitari began securing defensive positions as tech priests analyzed the battlefield. Using orbital auger arrays, each Magos shared a three-dimensional map of the battlefield and discussed its terrain, key objectives, and enemy positions on enclosed data tethers. Magos Lazifex ordered the Benaric chant of war psalms be broadcasted from every voxcaster. As Marshal Orlydian beamed coordinates to the leaving dropships for their final payload. Geiger counters, manufactured on Forge World Antax by the look of them, sang their panicked choir in power armor helmets as a rad bombardment fell on the enemy like cleansing sunlight. The 8-foot-tall warriors threw themselves to cover, their armor not rated to withstand radiation in such concentrated doses. Pinned between irradiated fields and a wall of drilling equipment, they were forced to advance, funneling into choke points created by the 4-story relics of industry they so ignorantly sought to dismantle. The Emperor's finest ran headlong into the carefully calculated firing lines of the cult Mechanicus. Directed by a junior techno-archaeologist eager to get near the equipment littering the battlefield, a killclade of elite Sicarian rust stalkers built of lightweight alloys bounded up close to the advancing Marines. Movement randomization formula made their approach vectors too unpredictable, even for the advanced reflexes of the super soldiers. Bolter fire burst against rockcrete walls, plasteel beams, and anything else nearby besides its intended targets. The rust stalkers closed the distance on spring-loaded limbs and matched the resonant frequency of their transonic razors to the ceramite of Space Marine power armor. In perfect wordless synchronicity, they feinted their way past the first line of soldiers and instantly struck down the sergeant as he was mid-rally cry. They were custom-built to attack the spirit of the unaugmented mind, to sow disorder amongst less stable fighting forces. Bedlam was as much their weapon as their vibrating blades. The techno-archaeologist was not so skilled, his chest shredded with a well-placed bolt while he gawked at the machinery he should have been taking cover behind. As the infantry approach was slowed by the ceramite assassins, cataphron-patterned servitors rolled listlessly into position behind them, targeting protocols set to focus on the heaviest armor in sight. Their heavy arc rifles released shallow parabolas of ceramite melting energy at the pair of looming dreadnoughts advancing from around an abandoned Promethium storage tank. The walking tombs lumbered into view, their clunky march in contrast to the stalking stride of a Sidonian dragoon as it found a flanking position. Taser lance locked in place for a crippling strike on a shoulder joint. The dragoon charged. Each stride kicked up dust, which mixed with the incense billowing from its sides. The attack was interrupted as the larger dreadnought spun on its waist and grabbed the lance, redirecting it upward. Electricity peeled off the lance like a reverse lightning rod, arcing into the dreadnought's arm. The dreadnought aimed its meltagun at the center of the dragoon, but an arc beam slammed into its shoulder, releasing the lance from its vice-like grip and sending the melt-a-shot wide. The dragoon's pilot commanded his walker to reverse. The stump legs of the onboard servitor twitched as it compensated for the maneuver in preparation for another charge. Magos manipulus, Lecestus mourned every crippling shot as Cataphron servitors landed on the enemy's marvelous engines of war and organized a subroutine of prayers in the hope that much could be salvaged when the battle was over. Transonic blades hummed their sickening tune, and arc beams crackled against dreadnought armor. It was all a preamble, however, for the holy neutron laser of the Onager dune crawler. It locked onto the warp power that now emanated from the walking sarcophagus of the long-dead librarian dreadnought focused on the dragoon. Battlefield projections predicted a 77.8% chance of minimal losses, barring any unforeseen variables. It is unfortunate that such variables often come equipped with jump packs. Descending upon the Skitarii Rangers, holding strategic points on the rear flank, Death Company units threatened to surge into an unprotected rear and force the heavy frontline guns to split fire. Through deft footwork, the Rangers kept a safe distance from the savage horde long enough to whittle them down to manageable numbers under a hail of galvanic fire. Each round released a burst of electricity which danced through midnight black power armor, causing actuators and servos to malfunction and the muscles beneath to spasm. Unfortunately, the raving attack dogs could not be held at Mechadendrite's length for long, closing the distance and tearing through the steel shells of the Skitarii until they found the fragile flesh that lay beneath. Their chaplain, guiding their rage, brutalized the cybernetic fodder with grace unbecoming such an imposing form and incongruous with his berserker subordinates. As oil fought with blood for space amongst the gravel, Marshal Orlidian Beta 1 stood alone against the towering figure and rerouted processing power to defensive protocols. His rangers were dead, and the rangers protecting the Magos Dominus were quickly dwindling. He knew killing the chaplain single-handedly was improbable. He opted to simply protract his death, distracting the chaplain long enough for a heavy armor unit to divert from the front lines and avenge him. He heard the clangor of metal on earth as the Sidonian dragoon's legs crumpled beneath the psychic might of the librarian dreadnought. That left Magos, Datasmith, Noctur, and her pristine pair of Castellan robots as the closest hope to maintain the rear position. Each blow from the chaplain's axe tore through pneumatics and wiring as Orlidian heard critical system failure alarms overlap in his mind. He was content to simply prevent any blow from striking his head. He hoped to continue his service to the tech priests as a servo skull, assuming salvage operations reclaimed his body quickly enough. However, his death already a foregone conclusion and his position more replaceable than that of a tech priest. His assailant was given low target priority. The Castellans first came to the aid of the Dominus, his spidery legs firmly planted in a mound of his fallen Skitarii bodyguards. Lazifex swung the cog-shaped blade of his power axe with augmetic arms into the chest of one soldier, and simultaneously fired slugs from his mechadendrite-mounted macro stubber into the faceplate of another that got too close. The remaining warriors then disappeared in flame as the Castellans coated them in thrice-blessed promethium from their shoulder-mounted incendine combustors. The mad savages attacked aimlessly as they cooked inside their armor and cursed Horus, despite Auspex readings showing no signs of the traitor Primarch in the vicinity. As the neutron laser disabled the remaining dreadnought, Cataphron breachers crushed power armor under tread. The roar of Taraxi sterilizer jets heralded the chemical fire that engulfed the rear flank of the Space Marine detachment. Cornered by robots that dwarfed even his enhanced frame, the lone chaplain's blood boiled in sympathy for his burning battle brothers. The black rage he directed into battle so many times welled up inside him, contrasted by the dispassionate analysis of the tech priests, loitering like vultures behind the imposing automatons which stood just outside of his reach. His charge straight at them was an act of spite and rage. His immolation from a safe distance was an act of passionless pragmatism. As the final pair of hearts were silenced, Dominus Lazifex led the survivors in giving proper thanks to the machine spirits of their weapons, and began ritual preventative maintenance on all critical systems. Manipulus Laquestes cataloged the prizes of the battlefield and created a list of priority pieces of interest, while Data Smith Noctur began a sacred salvage procession. Incense dispensers custom fitted into the fingers of the Castellan robots billowed smoke onto the scrap that they carried and ensured the machine spirits of the dead's augmetics would accept recycling attempts. Memory skimmers compiled battle data from the residual activity in the intact brains of the fallen, and the tactics of the Knights of Blood were added to data vaults aboard the orbiting fleet. Much was salvaged from the battlefield, and lists of local law enforcement agencies were combed for potential replacements of lost Skitarii. Skitarii Marshal Orlidian Beta 1, for his commendable troubleshooting performance in the face of unpredicted obstacles, had his head fashioned into a servo skull and was permanently affixed to his successor, Marshal Pericalcus Beta 2. Without hesitation or pause for reverence of the dead, machines with vestigial flesh planned the construction of a hallowed planet-wide prison quarry, the search for the lost Ark Mechanicus, and the removal of any obstacle in the path of those divine endeavors. The seed of industry was planted outside the city of Canterbury, and its new gardeners nurtured it diligently, ready to guard its bounty jealously.